If I could go back in time, I would probably change the word TERF to something else, because the acronym Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist is a misnomer, and it's obvious when you break it down piece by piece.
Many people are unaware that TERF is an acronym, as the word is often used interchangeably with lesbian, feminist, or even just woman I disagree with. The term was first used in 2008 by Viv Smith, a self-described cis-het woman who ran a feminist blog. On August 17, 2008, Smith wrote a blog post announcing TERFs, the first use of the term, in regards to the internet discussions on gender identity going on amongst other feminist bloggers, where she wrote, "I'm aware that this decision is likely to affront some trans-exclusionary radical feminists, but it must be said. Marginalizing trans women at the actual risk from regularly documented abuse/violence in favor of protecting hypothetical cis women from purely hypothetical abuse/violence from trans women in women-only spaces strikes me as horribly unethical, as well as repellently callous."
Like the first part, trans exclusionary, it doesn't really describe the extent of their hatred towards trans people. It's not like they're just not letting trans women into feminist spaces.
This was regarding the presence of trans women at lesbian separatist festivals, which later would shut down under the pressure to allow men to enter those festivals. She later compared TERFs to racists by stating, "Much of the factional divide here comes down to yet another gatekeeping argument about purity and feminism, perennial since the women's suffrage movement, and this one has uncomfortable echoes of Elizabeth Cady Stanton's arguments against extending voting rights to black men." The concept of female separatism being equivalent to racism and fascism in part stems from the proliferation of the term TERF by Smith, which can be seen in the comparisons of lesbians unwilling to date trans women, of women wanting single-sex bathrooms, to segregation.
They bully and harass trans people. They use slurs against them. They're actively opposed to the well-being of trans people when they say they shouldn't use certain facilities like restrooms or crisis centers.
However, the term TERF itself is a misnomer. Trans-exclusionary radical feminist implies that radical feminism does not include trans individuals, when it does. It includes female trans individuals and excludes male trans individuals. Radical feminism seeks female liberation, and just as one cannot expect that black activism or Asian activism to center around other groups, why should feminism be any different? Quite simply, the exclusion of men from radical feminism's purview is what angers trans individuals so much. It invalidates the concept of gender being innate, and offends by refusing to include trans women as female and refusing to exclude trans men as male. It's no wonder that so many misunderstand what radical feminism stands for, when questioning gender ideology at all gets you branded as a TERF and therefore as a valid victim for harassment, bullying, and even violence. In any debate about trans topics, the feminist perspective is neglected and often assumed to be lumped in with a conservative perspective.
And they partner with conservatives to try to pass anti-trans legislation. That's not just exclusionary, that's reactionary. They're a hate group.
As if the two criticize transgenderism for the same reasons. Often, liberals and conservatives have more in common regarding gender than either has with radical feminism, as both implicitly support the idea of innate femininity or masculinity, though in different ways. Liberals often misunderstand feminism, though they claim to be feminists themselves, and use this misunderstanding to support the inclusion of trans women, that is, males, in feminist activism and spaces.
And the next letter, R, they're not very radical either. The only radical thing about them is that they don't look at things through an individualist lens, but that's really as far as it goes. They claim they're radical because they attack patriarchy at the root, but their analysis of patriarchy is very weak. And they don't give a very clear revolutionary plan as to how to attack it. Plus, they're not communist or anarchist or socialist, so they're not radical in the sense that they're anti-capitalist. A lot of them are pro-Bernie at best. And the last letter, they're not very good feminists either.
For example, the often misunderstood topic of intersectional feminism, which was initially coined to illustrate how experiences of womanhood could be different due to class, racial, and ethnic differences. Because of these differences, women will face different challenges and lead different lives, but will still have the common experience of being female, both growing up and being socialized as female, as well as more structural and invisible aspects such as experiencing medical misogyny. This does not mean that men who do not agree with socially imposed standards of masculinity, who do not like their male bodies, or who wish to identify as women are actually another female experience. This also does not mean that women who disagree with and chafe under the experience of living in a patriarchal world and wish to identify out of it are not female. The conflation of race playing a difference in how women experience misogyny with trans-identified males is another common defense stemming from intersectionality, most often tied to the quote by Sojourner Truth, "Ain't I a woman?" or Simone de Beauvoir's often quipped line that one is not born a woman, but rather becomes one. By doing so, the argument relies on conflating recognizing womanhood as being a female experience with racism. After all, if you don't think trans women are women, then how can you think black women are women? The argument itself is manipulative, but works well on those more concerned with appearing politically correct rather than actually being morally or factually correct.
If you are not standing up for trans women as much or more than you do cis women, stop calling yourself a feminist. Any more than us white women should be calling ourselves feminists when we do not stand up for the rights of Black, Indigenous, and other women of color. You support women, all women, or you don't actually support women at all.
The use of the term intersectionality to refer to the inclusion of trans women is itself a racially loaded argument, as it was originally coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 to refer to the material reality of the intersection of sex and race, specifically regarding black girls. To use the phrase as an intellectual bludgeon to shut down conversation is to ignore that systems of power exist and are observable, with a historical and material basis that transgenderism lacks, as it has no material or clear definition, or material basis for a system of oppression. The purpose of feminism is not to include or exclude individuals. It is not meant to validate one's personal choices or to create a special club for one to join or be excluded from. The goal of feminism is women's liberation from the patriarchy. This includes objecting to and critiquing gender roles and stereotypes, which transgenderism relies on upholding by definition. To claim that womanhood is an idea, an aesthetic, or a club to join is to downplay the female experience and the subjugation that has historically, and continues today, to still occur to the female sex. The rise of the usage of the term TERF has aided in the habitual pushback to feminist gains, as transphobia is portrayed as being one of the worst types of bigotry, while misogyny is often downplayed, if even acknowledged at all, especially in spaces which focus on gender identity instead of material reality. It is used as a way to shut down discussion out of fear of social faux pas, and more so for the bullying and social detriment that being called a TERF causes. TERF is used interchangeably with feminist, lesbian, and outspoken woman. It is a gendered insult, similar to bitch or cunt. To pretend that it accurately describes anything, or that it holds more meaning than feminazi ever did, only plays into the gendered activism that ultimately seeks to redefine gender based on acceptance of oppression and stereotypes, which defines woman by acceptance of gender roles and expectations, which expects women to be silent when men speak, even if those men don't identify as such. That only women are called TERFs illustrates this point.
It is extremely disheartening to see women being reduced to stereotypes that we
Why are you wearing so much makeup? No hate. Makeup's fine. I don't know that much about it. No one ever taught me, and I feel like I'm too old to learn. But you probably have foundation, blush, you got the eyeliner. How many tries did it take before you got them symmetrical, right? You got the mascara. You got the lipstick that goes outside the lips to make them look bigger and more feminine. You probably have a whole skincare routine so you look younger and your skin's smoother. Then you have the long hair. You probably had to straighten your bangs this morning. And then you have this little delicate necklace that you put on, the feminine top, right? Why'd you do all that? How long did it take? I know you didn't roll out of bed. It probably took you a little bit of time, right? Is it so that if you go out or you make a TikTok, people perceive you in a way that is accurate to how you feel on the inside? Which is exactly what you're complaining about, that trans women are portraying themselves in a way that matches the way that they feel on the inside, so that that's how people see them. Probably a little bit for safety, too. You seem like the type of woman that would get mad if you saw a woman like me in the bathroom. So, yeah, you're a TERF. And a hypocrite. Good talk.
This, dear viewers, is where we part. This is one of the last videos that I'm pre-making a whole bunch of before I leave for Japan for a graduation trip, and then I haven't told anybody on the channel just yet, but I'm going back to Cambodia to focus on writing a book. I plan on converting a lot of these scripts into a coherent book about feminism in the age of the internet. And hopefully the idea of, being able to just not have to work. I have plenty of savings from selling my car and from working very hard these past 6 months. I'm hoping that with my savings, with the ability to just focus on writing, I'll be able to show something by the end of the year and say, hey, here is a cohesive manuscript about all this stuff with all the sources, with everything in it so that you can just read it. And then some people like watching the videos, which obviously you guys do. But I do hope that having this in written form will be something that's easier to take more seriously, if that makes sense. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time.